Right. Hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Privacy Bar Bants. And as usual, excited to have everyone today. Thank you for joining again. Thank you for keeping up with. Hi. All right, which coincides, last week, coincidentally, was the last Thursday was the World Data Protection Day, which also coincides with the 40th anniversary of opening of the Council of Europe Organized Convention, which happens to be the only international convention applicable as far as it relates to data protection globally. So this week, we're discussing another interesting topic, anonymity online, navigating anonymity online, which I know it's going to be some sort of interesting, we should be an interesting discussion. And for this week again, we've put up an amazing lineup, different professionals with really different backgrounds, which are going to bring in their diverse experience and diverse expertise to walk us through what it means to stay online, whether you can stay online, whether you can remain anonymous online, whether you I mean, there's so much big fear of big techs these days, and away from big tech, there's the big conversation around digital footprints, and how and it sounds dystopian sometimes, and how every single thing you do, you're being followed about, whether it's with advert, whether it's behavioral profiling, and all of these things. So amidst all of this, what do we do to reduce our digital footprints? How do we reduce the risk that we would that will come up against us and stuff like that? And these are some of the things we'll be discussing today. And as usual, I'm going to go back to the amazing line of panelists that we have today, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. For this week, I'm going to start with you, Nompilo. Nompilo.
Yes, I'm here. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. It's evening from my end, but it's good to engage with everyone today. So my name is Nompilo, as Ridwan rightfully said, and I am a lawyer by profession and currently working as the legal and ICT policy officer for the Media Institute of Southern Africa, the Zimbabwe chapter. And I am specifically responsible for issues relating to media law and digital rights, mainly initiatives and campaigns around that, and also legal and policy monitoring and engagements. Thank you.
I'm going to come to you, Shegun.
Okay, good afternoon or evening to everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Olusegun Ajibue, and I am a cybersecurity consultant. I have been in this field for going to 7 years now, and I have done a lot of work in a lot of areas in cybersecurity. I do not want to bore you with the details. But I'm also an internet user, so I do think about anonymity a lot and whether I need to stay anonymous and who I need to be anonymous from. Yeah, that's me.
All right, thank you, Shegun. Caroline, over to you, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Guia. I come from Kenya. I'm based in Nairobi. I'm a lawyer by profession. My role is basically to help clients or those in need with issues compliance, in general commercial practice, and also more specifically where need be privacy and cybersecurity compliance. So in a nutshell, that is what I would say I am for now. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that. Not the last person, but it's a usual face here already. So Nuruddin, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is, sorry, Ridwan gave my name already. I would have said some other name. My name is Nuruddin Odashino, IT security lead for one of the, I have to say this, leading oil and gas firm in Nigeria and also I think West Africa. I lead the security and data protection and privacy team at the firm. Co-founder of the NigerSec First team. And I provide support on privacy bans and a number of other privacy or data protection initiatives across Africa, I guess. Thanks, Freedom.
Thank you, Nuruddin, for that. Without wasting much of our time, Privacy Bants is an initiative of Tech Advisory, technology advisory firm. We keep the section around business law and technology, and essentially what they do there is they have interesting key areas or focus areas, which is privacy, data protection, cybersecurity, startup advisory, a lot of policy and research, digital health, and IP and technology. All right, so getting straight into the discussion, I know anonymity means different things to all of us, and of course, depending on the context as well, it could mean anything from people wanting to stay completely unrecognizable online to people wanting to stay unrecognizable online to probably even navigating the internet without being recognized. And you might wonder, last session, if you remember, our privacy field was on what do I have to hide? I have nothing to hide. And Victoria did justice to that, explaining why we should start thinking about privacy and thinking about data protection seriously, or why we should take it seriously. Victoria is not here, she's not here with us today, and she'll join us subsequently. She's doing really amazing. Yeah, so people have different reasons why they want to be anonymous, and I'm not really going to get into the gist myself. I'm going to allow the panelists here today to do just that. And I'm going to start with you, Nompilo. I'm going to start with you. So,
yes, sure.
Why would anyone want to be anonymous online? I mean, you see the way the internet architecture is built itself. It's there's some sense of interaction. We need to connect. We need to integrate. So why would anyone want to go? Why would anyone want to be anonymous online?
Well, I think as you rightfully mentioned that, sometimes we have different approaches to all of these things, especially the use of online platforms. But you realize that there are specific groups, vulnerable groups, minority groups. For instance, if you are in South Africa, there are people from the LGBTQ plus community, and such people would want anonymity instead of being known about who they are or their identity and what they're all about, because that would protect them from targeted harassment. But also there are some people who feel more comfortable expressing themselves when their identity is not known. So anonymity can be an option, so that you create an environment where you can freely express yourself, but also it can be a protection mechanism against harassment.
Thank you for that very quite insightful. How do I put this? Incisive and very short. I think that's a very good conversation starter. So I'm coming to you again on Pillow. You said we could have cases of people who truly, genuinely need to be anonymous because of the inherent risk in being identifiable. So we've seen things around. You work in the digital rights space, so a whole lot of human rights activists, for example, journalists, wanting that same safe space online. So how do we tie this back to also balancing it with the people who also use anonymity for some other reasons? And when I say some other reasons, what is negative could be subjective. But let's say negativity stretched to the extreme now. How should we start thinking about that?
So yeah, you mentioned a very good point, really, that with anonymity, there's also been so many unintended harms. I have so many cases of, social media abuse. But, in all of this, there's a need to strike a balance, between, exercise of the rights, the right to privacy, and of course, the right to anonymity, and striking a balance between that and also protecting the rights of other users. So if we want to curb that, I would suggest that we create an environment or a situation where, for instance, it is mandatory to ensure that at least the tech companies, for instance, if it's Facebook or Twitter, they have minimal personally identifying information about a person, despite that person might be using a pseudonym, for instance, but still there should be some information to which, if there's an offense that has been committed or anything of that sort, they'll be able to redirect to that person. And I think there should also be striking a balance with also, government's access to such information. So there are high cases of identity theft and the likes that are also done through online platforms. So my suggestion would be that, while it's protecting the right to privacy, there'll be a need to ensure that when governments follow due process, they can also be able to access information specifically for purposes of a very legitimate cause, instead of just randomly accessing, but striking a balance between privacy and, public interest, for instance.
That's a very good one. Thank you. Boy, I'm going to come to you. Shego, I'm going to come to you now. If I want to go online and I want to be anonymous, how can I be anonymous online? I know that looks like a tricky, it looks like a simple question, but
that's a wide question.
And I wanted to do that quick, and I wanted to do that briefly too, because there's so many issues we'll be getting into today. So, and when you're answering that as well, you might probably want to put at the back of your mind as well. I know there's this other side of the web, or is it the deep web? Is it the dark web? So all of those things, while you're thinking about it. So quickly before Shegun takes that answer, we're running a poll currently. If you can see my screen, just join us at slido.com, sli.do. Enter this access, use this keyword, is it the key phrase or how do I put it? Access key, hashtag Z487. So you'll be able to share your opinion about what you think about what anonymity is. Or you can describe it to us in one word. Thank you. All right, shall I go over to you, please?
I think that's a very wide question. How can you be anonymous on the internet, or how can you be sure that you're anonymous on the internet? I would start by saying not all requirements for anonymity are equal. And like Nompilo said, so for example, recently, someone sent me a video of, I don't know if you know this song called Cops, but if you search for it online, it's basically a song where they sing and they use cops to make some of the rhythm, cops and clapping. And it was a very famous thing a while back. But then someone used a gun instead of cops to make the rhythms, where he would cock and uncock and jam the cartridge in and take it out and all of that. And he used it to make a rhythm. Someone sent me the video. When I saw the title, I was like, I would like to see this. But at the same time, if I open this just normally in YouTube, when I wake up tomorrow morning, YouTube is going to start recommending gun videos to me. I am not interested in gun videos. And so I just opened that video in incognito mode. And I'm probably touching on incognito earlier than I wanted. But at that level, I wanted to see a video. I did not care for my internet service provider to see that I'm going to YouTube, or maybe even my employer to see that I was going to YouTube. But I just did not want that to be saved in my YouTube watch history as this guy watches gun videos, because I really don't watch gun videos. So I wanted to be anonymous from YouTube only, and not all the other people who could have access to my information. And so I would say it depends on at what level you want to be anonymous. If you want to be completely anonymous from the government, your internet service provider, your employer, and everybody, then you would have to find ways and tools. And there are tools that let people do this to a certain degree, to hide yourself pretty much. I know a fair number of us know about VPNs. That works to an extent. I know some of us have heard of something called Tor that also works to an extent. So at different layers, depending on what level you want to be anonymous or who you want to be hidden from, there are many different things you can do. I will say, though, that anything used by human beings, for anything that's used by human beings will be the weakest link, so to speak. And even for something like Tor, which a lot of people think is very secure, criminals have been caught who were using Tor. So it's nothing is 100% foolproof, I would say. It just depends on what your requirements are.
Shego, I think you should just say it as it is. There's nothing like universal anonymity, as in you can't achieve it.
So yes, I would agree with that. And I think the reason for that is because the internet as it is designed today, all the products and services we use on the internet are designed to gather information about us and to find us elsewhere, wherever else we go physically in the real world or virtually on the internet. So if you want to exist in the 21st century on the internet, it may be impossible to be completely anonymous. Nompilo talked about the social media companies gathering PII. And between your email provider, your social media company, even your phone company, you will have provided some PII to the point where it may be difficult to stay completely anonymous. I personally don't feel the need to be completely anonymous all the time, but from time to time, I want to be anonymous to a small degree. Yeah.
Ridwan, I think you're muted. Ridwan.
All right, so Nuruddin, I'm going to come to you now. I'm going to come to you quickly, and we're going to take it off from there. So, Shego has laid a background into how, quote and unquote, technically it might be so difficult to 100% anonymous online. But also what we have seen is also the emergence of what I would describe as decentralized platforms. So in lieu of Twitter, for example, we have Mastodon. In lieu of electronic communication, we have platforms like Elements.io that is built on Matrix, which allows people to sort of integrate without even using username, to have the enjoy end-to-end encryption, and you can be whoever it is you want to be in a decentralized internet, on the decentralized internet. And just moments before we got on this session, Elements tweeted that Google kicked them out of Play Store, and they said they didn't know, but pretty much later they cited said Google's explanation was that some bad things. And also, if it comes to search engine, there are so many alternatives that really don't track you around or follow you around like some popular ones. So I'm bringing it back to you right now. If you put the concept of anonymity as we know it, or to what it means to you, I'm trying to balance that with the technical aspect of what we try to balance that with what we call the decentralized internet. How does that, what does that really mean for us as users?
Okay, all right, thanks, Ridwan. I think, not that I think, let me start off from this point. There are a number of supposedly thought leaders or even organizations that have sort of mentioned some concern. I mean, it's like an holy grail sort of internet security. People are sort of saying, I mean, there's an argument to that fact that anonymity is bad, right? In that sense, I think even as far back as, say, maybe 2012 or thereabouts, I think one of the leaders or one of the owners of one of the antivirus companies mentioned something like that. And it was alluding to the fact to have a framework or to have a system where everyone can be universally identified. I mean, so Shego had gone into much detail into how that is almost impossible. I mean, how that is impossible, and also how even anonymity by itself, it's almost impossible online. But there are ways you can keep yourself protected. I mean, maybe that's probably what you're alluding to. I mean, and there are a number of solutions out there, some of which you have mentioned. But the question always is, which is one of the reasons why I made that remark after Shegun explained how to remain anonymous online, is anonymity is subjective. You would always still find that you are only able to remain hidden in a particular instance, or from a particular person, or from an individual, or from a company. You use VPN, for example. You use Tor, for example. You use all the privacy-friendly websites or browsers that are not able to track you across the internet. I mean, that speaks to things around tracking, right? Nobody can follow you around the internet. Doesn't mean you're anonymous. And I'm sure we're going to get to that too. You use VPN, for example. You're able to sort of encrypt your internet traffic, right? That is not oblivious to your internet service providers. So even the so-called companies which you've mentioned, whether it's Element, whether it's Mastodon, or some of the other companies, whether it's even Tor, some of which have open source framework, or some are actually proprietary, they can actually see what it is you're doing. Recently, most social media companies have been touting end-to-end encryption. I mean, we saw that was actually pretty rubbish with the updates which we saw on one of the recent privacy policies of one of the social media. I'm trying not to mention names, which we saw recently. They touted end-to-end encryption, and even within the same policy itself, they mentioned around your someone asked me to mention names. They mentioned sharing your, I don't know what you're talking about, everywhere. They mentioned sharing the content of your message. So it makes you wonder, what does end-to-end encryption? And I think it's all simplified when it comes to security. And all those concepts which are actually being used, which might not be meaningful, or which might mean something else to the end user. So when you mention end-to-end encryption, for example, it might not necessarily mean that they are not reading your content, right? I mean, they can actually see the messages. They can copy the messages. When we mention VPN, there are different modes to VPN. Are we talking about the transport mode? Are we talking about the tunnel mode, where people can actually see the originating traffic and where it's coming from? But that's one on one side. The other side I want to also speak to. So that is against people who are saying that we should still try to strive for anonymity. But then there are also some people who are saying that we should ban anonymity online. There's a set of argument for that. And their argument basically is related to a concept within security today, what we call attribution. In the sense that if something should happen today, are we able to say definitely? So the same way people are listening to me right now, are they able to say definitely that it is Nuruddin speaking? Or is it is Nompilo speaking at the other end, or it's Shegun, or it's Caroline speaking? We really can't say. And that speaks to the concept of attribution within security, or also within anonymity. People are arguing that why don't we ban this in such a way that we can universally identify people, in such a way that I'm speaking right now, you'll be able to definitely say that this is Nuruddin speaking. There is an attack affecting a country, maybe it's Estonian, maybe it's Nigeria, and it's coming from somewhere. We are able to trace that down to the specific company. What we have today on the internet is, if a company gets attacked, if the US gets attacked, it's almost impossible for you to say that that attack came from North Korea, or came from China, or came from Russia, because of the whole way the internet is built. That by itself had some bit of dangers, both arguments, I would say, whether to have universal identification of people, despite what Nompilo had said, because there are people who actually have either they're marginalized or there are people who don't want to be identified. But there's also that concern about not identifying people and the evils that people do as a result of hiding under anonymity. So I think there are two sides of the argument. But then, like I said earlier on when Shegun made his comment, there's really nothing anonymous on the internet. The only way to stay anonymous or not, it's basically not to have a digital footprint. Don't go on the internet if you really want to stay anonymous. So what's your read one? Okay, I think read one probably has some bit of challenges with his.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm back. Thank you very much for that. Sorry, I had to go offline. I was having developing country problem. But I'm back now. All right. So
what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
It thought what country problem?
We need to re-authenticate you to be sure you are the one speaking.
Interesting. All right. So Caroline, I'm coming to you now.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm coming to you now. So when we speak, I mean, we've seen why it's important, or the good part of being anonymous, and why it's a safe haven for some persons. But also, we've seen also technically whether it's possible, whether it's impossible. We also examine that. So now, what are the risks? We've talked about the risk that people could face if they don't stay anonymous. Now, what are the risks inherent being anonymous too, and which also genuinely might also be a concern for public authorities? So if you can quickly just touch on one or two or three. Why could be dangerous being anonymous online? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ridwan. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Nurdin. Really, if you want to stay anonymous, stay offline for that matter. But in the digital era, it's almost impossible to do that in the current world we live in. So anonymity in its own sense is more of an issue of protecting the fundamental rights, human rights of the digital users or people with an online presence. And as we understand the laws, I'll speak from a legal perspective with a little angle on the society. So in every society, there must be order. There must be a law, and the law exists for some order. And for that order to be realized, there has to be limitations, like the first speaker mentioned. When you talk about international human rights, you talk about issues like freedom of expression. From the human rights perspective, the issue of staying anonymous online is basically to protect the fundamental human rights like freedom of expression. It means that you can hide behind a computer and write information or give your views without being judged or without being recognized or without specifically being referred to in the event that you're in the instance mentioned that you're a person of interest or your target group. So when you talk about anonymity, you talk about freedom of expression, you talk about human rights. Human rights also come in the sense of commercial interests. They also come in the sense of issues like protecting freedom of expression, as I explained. So what are the risks of being anonymous? The problem of being anonymous, in my opinion, or if I would say, it is subject to abuse. You're given too much freedom. Human beings being human beings, or individuals or institutions being institutions, they're most likely be in a position to abuse that right to be anonymous. You use information that you're not supposed to use to, for instance, perpetuate violence, or for instance, result to character assassination, or selling out people's or issuing out people's identifiable information for in that matter, in the instance where it is a free world, that your information can easily be decrypted for your service provider, so to say. So the risks of that being that people are bound to abuse that right of entitlement to stay anonymous, and yield in the insecurity issues like the ones that I have just explained, when you talk about money laundering, when you talk about terrorism. So that is why there has to be a limitation to every right that you're accorded as an individual, especially on the digital platform. You're accorded the right to speak your mind. You're accorded the right to write what you want, but there's also a limitation to that right. To what extent can you write? To what extent can you express yourself? Are you expressing yourself at the detriment of other users? Or are you expressing yourself for the interest of promotion of justice or protection of individual rights, so to say? So in that sense, then it is important that there's a two-angle perspective to anonymity online. There's the part of balancing the interests of protecting rights, and the also part of maintaining law and order, so to say. So, and even while maintaining law and order, there's also a balance to it. For example, the government cannot just, or governments all over the world or anywhere in the world, cannot just compel a service provider, so to say, to provide them with information without a court order, for example, or without a justifiable reason to decrypt information, which in this case would be encrypted for purposes of anonymity. So it cuts on both ways, if I could say. There's the essence of balancing interests from both ends. But in reality, really, in the world we live in right now, it is really difficult to say that you're anonymous. You can never be anonymous anywhere. Go to the US, go to the UK, go to Europe, come to Africa. Maybe in Africa it's even worse because of the issues of abuse of power and things like that. The rights to privacy are not really accorded, so to say. And also when you talk about commercial interests, from the commercial perspective, a lot of providers, service providers, so to say, they don't really keep your information that anonymous, especially for purposes of commercial interests or generating income or making profits. You will be told that your information remains anonymous, but to what extent are you anonymous? You're not anonymous to the extent where you give your location in that sense. You will stay there anonymous, but you're seated somewhere and the service provider knows where you are. You're logging in incognition mode, for instance, but it doesn't really protect you or protect the person or the website you're logging onto from tapping into the information that you're feeding in or whatever you're looking up to. So it is really a thin line on the discussion of anonymity. And if I would just give my opinion, should we really do away with anonymity? No, not entirely, even though we know that it's almost impossible to achieve anonymity on the digital platform, but just having the aspect of anonymity there still maintains some sort of order and balance, even though not in totality. So that would be what I have to say in brief as regards to that. Thank you.
I wanted to say something quickly,
Okay, please do
because a whole bunch of us have talked about law and order and balancing things and all of that. And that is great. But I mean, if you read about what happens across the world, the question becomes, and this is probably going a little bit out of scope, but I'll bring it back. The question becomes, who do you want to trust? Caroline talked about the government not requesting service providers, for example, to yield information without a court order. I think we have all seen across the world governments making service providers to yield information in one way or the other. And
Absolutely.
we have seen some people even get court orders. But when you look at the whole case, you wonder why the court gave that order. No law was broken, no suspicion, no reasonable suspicion of any law breaking happened. So the question for me as an individual and for random individuals across the world is, do I trust that the government will treat me fairly and justly? Do I trust that the judiciary will not be manipulated? When I see instances of governments not treating people fairly or instances of the judiciary being manipulated, how do I manage that risk for myself? Should I or should I not try to add extra layers of anonymity? And I saw a document once, a couple of years ago, that showed statistics of how different governments subpoena, I'm not sure whether it was Twitter or Facebook, to get the information on the people behind some of these accounts. So there's random handle, random profile picture, not a lot of personally identifiable information, but then the government subpoenas the company and they provide this information. So if I know that ultimately Twitter is going to yield my phone number, my full name, my email address, the question is, do I trust them? Should I? Yes, there should be a balance, but should I trust the government? That's the summary of it.
All right. Thank you, Shogun. We're going to get into the next session quickly. But before that, Nampila, I'm going to come to you. And I want you to take this question right after getting to the next session. So the question is for you. So, I mean, what you said is also, most of the big techs, they actually publish their transparency reports at the end of every year, where they actually detail governments that make requests for information and the type of information they also request. They publish it every year. Yeah. So, but moving on from that, is also the fact that when, the basic thing or the normal thing in the democratic setting is always going to be when even there is a request to lift the veil of anonymity. Is it reasonable? Is it proportionate? Is it necessary? And is it necessary to attain a legitimate purpose in a democratic setting? So that's like the yardstick to measure all of these things. But on Pilo, now to the question I intend to ask you. Sorry, I lost my line up. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so we're seeing big calls from, look at elections we've seen in a couple of African countries lately. In Nigeria, it's the call to have the social media regulation, stuff like that. But we also know in periods like this too, I don't know if you followed what happened in Nigeria a couple of months ago, where the government was trying to maintain a position that this is what happened during an incident. Then the citizens who probably were, and I used the word probably for carefully. So, but citizens who actually live through that experience themselves, like, oh, these are our own story. And the government is like, no, that's not the story. And, for stuff like that. And there are people who've come out to sort of share their own perspective. And in times like this, we need people who can speak. Of course, we know when they become identifiable, they could become persons of target. So the question to you now is, with the increasing call to regulate things like social media, increasing call across the globe also, in certain parts of the world, where the government is saying, no, we need backdoor encryption. Even though you have encryption, but at least you must give us access. How should we be thinking? What should we be rethinking now we approach a digital life? And you respond to that quickly when we take this next session.
Yeah, you know what? Actually,
sorry, Nampilo, you take that quickly, please. You take that right after this session.
Okay, great.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Shogun, over to you.
Okay. there is the general belief that going incognito keeps us anonymous. But honestly, when I look at incognito mode, I'm looking at incognito mode in Firefox right now. It says this doesn't make you anonymous to websites or to your internet service provider. And if I switch to Chrome, I'm sure I'll find a similar message. There is value in incognito mode. Like I said earlier, someone sent me a video, and I do not want that to change the kind of recommendations I try. Okay, believe what you want to believe. I don't want that to change the kind of recommendations I see on YouTube. So I go into incognito mode to view that. Sometimes, for example, if you book flights online, you may find that the more you check a website, like a flight booking website, the prices start to go up and up and up. And I think I read an article where people did an investigation, and they found that that when the website sees that you have visited a couple of times, then they may start to increase the price to create urgency in you and make you buy now. So if you go in incognito mode, you get the fresh perspective of someone who has not been there at all. And that is great. So incognito mode has its value. However, if you think about, and I'll try to explain this without getting too technical. If you think about, for example, I have a laptop in my house and I am using it to access the internet. What information about me exists and what information about that laptop exists, and how can those sets of information be tied together? For example, your laptop has something called the MAC address. If a MAC address is basically a physical address that is contained on the hardware of your computer. The question now is, at the place where you bought that laptop, do they have any record that identifies that laptop and identifies you as a buyer? So if you provided your name for the receipt, your phone number, your first 6 and last 4 of your PAN, if they have that on record in a receipt, or your email address, if you created an account for support and you've made support calls, what information do they have on you and that computer that they can tie together to identify you? And we have seen situations in which law enforcement was tracking a suspect who was on the move. And one of the things that I have seen done in some other parts of the world is that if they suspect that a person has been in a place, maybe a hotel or a coffee shop or all of that, they go to that place and obtain the logs of the devices that are connected to the Wi-Fi there, for example. And right there, they find your MAC address. And so they know that you have been there, even though you were in incognito mode in your browser. So does it really make you anonymous? I don't think so. Who provides you with internet access? We touched on this briefly earlier. In Nigeria here, when you register a SIM card, I use a few SIM cards to access the internet. They have my face on file. They have my fingerprint on file, I hope. They have my address. I think they have the next of kin information. And so they assigned me an IP address one day when I get on the internet, and I use that IP address in incognito mode to do some crazy things. They can take that record and correlate it with my SIM. They see which phone number got this IP address. They check the details for that.
Can you wrap up quickly?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And so they see who has it and who that actual individual is. So the whole point is, beyond your browser, there are many layers of providers and devices that enable you to access the internet. And while incognito mode may ensure that your history is not saved, at a lot of those other layers, you can probably be identified. The last thing I'll say is this: if you are using a device that was given to you by somebody else, that's managed by somebody else, so like your employer, for example, you should never assume you can be anonymous, even if you are in incognito mode. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Shegun. There's a question here for us. For Numpilo, your intervention, please.
My apologies, I realized I was on mute. So I'll just link that up also with the question, with the question on whether or not we can trust our government. I just wanted to give some contextual information on what has been happening in Zimbabwe. For starters, also resonating with what Caroline was saying, that the government itself here in Zimbabwe has been using, government loyalists or ruling party loyalists to, do some form of targeted harassment towards opposition or towards critics. And they were using the same tactics, of being anonymous online or using pseudonyms and the likes. So you realize that it's not only individual users or ordinary users who are relying on anonymity. It has also become a tool, for political reasons and political gains. Now, when you move that to the issue of whether or not we can trust our governments, recently in Zimbabwe, we have a journalist that has been arrested. He has been arrested thrice already on different charges. But the issues or the charges started coming up when he was exposing corruption by the government using Facebook and Twitter. And I have it in confidence that the government reached out to Facebook requesting for information on the requesting, actually they're requesting access into the journalist's Facebook account. And Facebook refused, and there were attempts to hack his account. But clearly we are seeing here a government trying to use unorthodox means to access information about an internet user. So really, we cannot really trust governments in a situation where even the laws themselves are repressive, or where clearly you see that freedom of opinion and freedom of expression is not really guaranteed. Now, when you move that to the issue of granting of backdoor encryption, it's a definite no from me in terms of my opinion whether or not that should be done. I don't think it should be done, because as we've already discussed, social media and the internet generally has created platforms for free flow of information. It has created platforms for open exchange of ideas, and that is very key, not only with regards to privacy, but also with regards to the very basic tenets of democracy in each and every environment. So if governments end up having backdoor access to backdoor encryption, what that means basically is that, firstly, that tool or that capacity can be used for targeted harassment. It can be used to silence critics. It can also be used even for sharing of information, even with third parties. We know in Zimbabwe in 2018, we woke up to a headline that our government was giving a Chinese-based company, I think it's called Cloudwalk Technology, that Zimbabwe had made a commitment to give that company personal data, personal identifiable data, to help the company with its facial recognition technology. And definitely no due process was followed there. So in such a situation where you have governments that are keen on not following due process, that are keen on not abiding to the three-pronged test as far as limitation of rights is concerned, as you rightfully mentioned, Ridwan, I don't think that would be such a good move, because the internet itself thrives on some sense or some belief that there is some form of privacy. And I think there should be more safeguards for the protection of data instead of limitation. Thank you.
Hi, Ridwan. I think you're muted, Ridwan.
I keep making these mistakes. All right, so Nampilo, there's a question I'd like you to take, which is a question we got from the, I don't know if I still have that question showing here. That was a question we got from the Slido page. Do you think I'm coming. Hang on, please.
Yeah, I think the question was really as regards
Okay.
balancing.
If you can take that, please take it.
accountability.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I think the question was about balancing, speaking about accountability and also balancing the need for maintaining privacy or anonymity online by the individual, and also the government's need for surveillance or using that data. To speak to that, there was an interview by Bruce Scheiner. Bruce Scheiner is like the godfather of internet security. He's a cryptographer. There was an interview where he granted, I think this must have been a long time ago, maybe 2000, just shortly after the 9/11 attack, where he spoke to, and also after the famous Snowden leaks, he spoke about the NSA mass surveillance. And he conducted a bit of research just before that interview. And what he alluded to is this, that the mass surveillance of data in the US, as we know today, I mean, given the Snowden leaks, has not in any way contributed to improving security in the US. And I speak this, and also it also applies to all other countries where mass surveillance is done, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Nigeria, because there are also hints of that happening. When you conduct mass surveillance without bounds, without defining the necessity and proportionality of the data which you're collecting, it doesn't translate to improved security. If it does, for example, today, we won't have some of the security challenges which we are facing. I mean, look at all the amount of data that's been collected by the Nigerian government today across all various agencies, whether it's NIMSI, whether it's NIDA, whether it's FIRS. So how come we are still having the amount of insecurities which we have today? And this speaks to every other country, whether it's Kenya, whether it's any other country where there are insecurities. But then on the other side, too, there's also mass surveillance of data or mass collection of data by government agencies. So I think there are two different things. It is important that this data is collected, but if it's going to happen, it has to be based on those two things I mentioned in the chat: necessity and proportionality. Is it necessary to collect all those types of data, or is it necessary to collect the data of everybody? And what sort of data are we talking about? And also in terms of proportionality, what data should we focus on? And those are the two key things when you look at when you're talking about LIA, for example, within data protection or privacy assessment, or even within data protection in principle when it comes to data collection, or I don't want to use surveillance, when it comes to data collection. You think you balance it on the need for necessity. Is it necessary to collect that data? And proportionality. What amount of data are you collecting? So while there's a need to ensure that you're anonymous online, there's also that need to balance it against those other rights, which are much more important when it comes to national security or public health and some of these other things which affect not only the individual, but affects the collective society.
All right. Thank you, Nuruddin, for that intervention. So, Caroline, I'm going to come to you quickly now. And in the data protection, from a data protection point of view, we've had privacy preserving strategies like pseudonymization. We've heard terms like that, anonymization come up, which are essentially measures to reduce the risk to personal data. And when I say personal data, we should always think about the individuals beneath the numbers and the ones and the zeros. Always think about it's an individual that is behind that. So pseudonymization. So quickly, I want you to make a distinction between pseudonymization and anonymization. Then I have a follow-up question to that as well. Thank you. Do that quickly, please. Caroline. The mic is muted.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I had a little hitch. Please, just quickly, I had a little hitch.
Ridwan, you want to take the question again?
Please.
Okay, let me just take the question again. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, in reducing the risk surface or reducing risk to a data subject, and of course by extension their personal data, we've had privacy preserving strategies like or concepts like pseudonymization, anonymization, federated learning, homomorphic encryption, and all sorts come up. But I'm more interested between the distinction between pseudonymization and anonymization. If you can do that quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. Like I previously mentioned, anonymization.
It's perfectly fine, don't worry.
Anonymization is basically hiding or having your information or data encrypted in a way that the metadata or the data cannot be read by somebody else who is not the person to whom it was intended to. It means that the information or the data is converted into metadata or arithmetics and things like that, so that it doesn't specifically say expressly what you're saying or who is saying it. Pseudonymization, I will say, is more of it's more of a data management. It's more like you're playing with the actual data, where you replace one data or metadata or arithmetic by a more artificial identifier or a pseudonym. They're terms that I could say are terms that are used in tandem, the identification, so to say. So this identifies and this de-identifies. When you talk about anonymization, it means you are off. Nobody knows who you are. You're basically, it's a dark blanket. When you talk about pseudonymization, I am so sorry. It means that your data or whatever information you're playing with in between is decrypted, encrypted. It's more of an interplay of the two. So really, I don't think I can make it as clear from my explanation, but I think from a technical perspective, it will make more clarity. So maybe if it's not as clear as I've explained, Nurdin can help me.
All right, thank you. Nurdin, I was going to come to you.
We have to charge Ridwan for putting you through that stress.
My goodness.
I didn't mean to embarrass you. That wasn't my intention. But hey, it's not your language, you know.
It's fine. It's okay.
Spare the colonizers, please. All right. So, Nurdin, I was going to come to you now. In a more practical sense, you working leading the IT space in your organization, and a multinational out there. How do you see anonymization and pseudonymization comes to play? And I want you to give, I know you like illustrations a lot, so I want you to give that. Then the follow-up question will be, an anonymized data, is it still a personal data? And if truly anonymization, in that sense, is truly anonymous? Well, I want you to do that quickly. We're almost running out of time here.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, Ridwan. I think I'll do it very quickly, and I'll use an illustration. So not quite recently, there was a need to carry out an anonymous survey within my organization. And in that sense, I'm using anonymous loosely right now. We don't want to know who partook in the survey, and also, so we don't want to know who partook in the survey. Basically, we want the responses to be truly anonymous. And there was also a need to actually, this survey was supposed to be done via email. So that means that we're sending email to people for them to participate in the survey, but then want to make sure that the survey is anonymous. And the challenge really is this. We didn't want to send out email just to the survey was carried out by someone outside of the organization, right? And we are bothered around giving the people names and emails of people within our organization, right? So what we basically did is, so I'm not sure if everybody gets that picture. Let me paint it again. Wanted to carry out a survey, anonymous survey, but this survey is supposed to be delivered by an external party. And they require names and email address of people within our organization so they can send them the email for them to partake in that survey. So basically what we did was that we were challenged with giving out names of people and also their email addresses. So what we basically did was we did some bit of pseudonymization. In that sense, we created random email addresses to people. It was automatically generated, and we gave out these random email addresses to these people. So by the email address, you can never tell who they can never tell who they're sending the emails to. And basically, that's how we solved that challenge. And that is basically pseudonymization. And what that means is that from a security parlance, you encode the data, but you can also decode the data. So we have pseudonymized the data. We have given them an email, but we can actually turn that email back to the original person who owns the email address. So that's pseudonymization. For anonymization, on the other hand, within the context of data protection and privacy, that's so when you anonymize data, what that basically means within that context is it is out of the scope of most data protection regulation, because what you have basically done is you have sort of de-identified that data. And I'm using the term de-identification is still something different, but I'm using that term very roughly. So if you think of ciphers within, with pseudonymization, meaning encoding and decoding, in anonymization, you should think about hashing. And in security, when it comes to hashing, it's basically one way. You can only hash, you cannot convert that hash back to the original data. So think of that as anonymization, in which sense that you cannot restore that data to the original form. And by you doing that, you have sort of de-identified the data, and it's no longer within the scope of most data protection regulations. So you don't need to worry about that. So I hope that provides a bit of clarity. And that's basically what happens. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you for that intervention. And I think summary is pseudonymized data is still personal data, and anonymized data is no longer personal data. And I'm going to also throw this into the mix. There was a recent research that was published by, I can't remember the university, but the one was published by UK University, and another report was published by an Australian university that said even the anonymization that we're talking about as we know it is actually not fully anonymous, because by the time those anonymized data sets themselves, by the time you aggregate them with some other data or data that are related to it, it is still possible to uniquely identify the individuals behind them. So when you are throwing those words around, when you read privacy notices and they tell you they've anonymized data, be careful. There's really no magic wand to it. Mitigation risk, it has to keep evolving. You don't just throw magical words around or just throw technology to solve problems like that. Whatever model or whatever approach you're taking to solving, minimizing risk that could possibly impact personal data, it has to be situational. It means it has to work for the context of what you're doing. So from what we know, anonymization itself is not fully anonymous. I'm going to go into the next session, Caroline, for game on. We're going to go into the game on session quickly. I want you to do that quickly, please. Yeah. You're muted, Caroline.
I'm on. So
go on, please.
game on. The question is,
do you want to read out the rules first?
The rules are, we provide the definition of the term, you provide the answer. For example, question, that code you get on your phone from the internet, what is it? The answer will be two-factor authentication. Okay? So our first question would be,
You can read out as well.
the easy answer is, sorry, I don't have my glasses on, so I'm reading from my phone because I can be able to increase. The easy answer is it's someone else's computer, but that's live comparing that's like comparing an AMC Pacer to a Bugatti Chiron. Technically true, but about as far from the reality of things as possible. Think of cloud computing as very specifically designed and built for one core purpose: the flexibility to allow the rest of us to move all our data systems and lives to it with minimal fuss and hassle. Next door's computer, I had to leave that one in. Who are we?
All right, if you're able to discern that question, you can please drop your response in the chat box. I'm moving on from that. Okay, let's see who's getting it, who's not getting it.
Wahala.
That's a little bit. All right, let's see if we can get more responses. And Shegun, I'm going to come to you with a question. So we have cybercrime laws in certain countries that prohibits using. I know this question might probably not situate more with you, and I'm going to come to Nompilo to also chime in on this and one other question. We have cybercrime laws in a number of countries that expressly prohibits using any technology to access the internet anonymously. But also, sometimes when the government tries to throttle the internet or try to gag the free space, one of the ways to navigate this is also using some other technology to still be able to access the internet. So now, how do we balance this competing interest? And I want you to do that quickly.
Okay, this is a very tricky one. If you want to, I mean, it's a simple, I don't want to call it a simple issue, but the issue is it's basically the feeling that the law is unfair. I feel like if we look into history, we'll find different times in history when different kinds of laws have been made by governments which are unfair. There have been times in the past where human beings were considered property by law, and you could trade them. And so in the same way, if you're in a place where by law you have decided, where by law you should not be accessing the internet, or you can only access certain portions of the internet, and you deliberately decide that you will circumvent those laws, first of all, you need to accept the risk that you are flouting laws, and you need to think about what could come with that and balance the benefits, really. Some people for this reason go into exile. Some people for this reason move out of the country completely. Some people start social movements and political campaigns to get some of these laws repealed. I don't think I can give anyone blanket advice or a recommendation to say you fly in the face of your country's laws. But I can definitely understand. I mean, for some things like just education and getting access to information, it can be really important and valuable in determining how your life goes and what kind of opportunities you have in the future. So I can understand the pull, but I think you need to, people in those situations need to think about it and accept the potential risks of what they're doing. If they can launch a political campaign, for example, talk to their elected leaders, representatives, and all that to get some of these laws repealed, that would be great and ideal. But in the meantime, you are running some risks and you need to be fine with that in your heart, so to speak.
Okay, sorry. I said before I got off, sometimes ago, I saw someone raising their hand. I'm not sure who the person is. If you still want to speak, please do so. So Nampilo, I'm going to come to you quickly now. And my question to you is, okay, Gbemi, I'm coming. Let me give you permission to speak, or is that a mistake? I saw you raising your hand. You can unmute yourself to speak.
Sorry, Ridwan, it was me.
Okay.
Probably it was a mistake.
All right. No problem then. Okay. Yeah. So I was going. Mike. I was going to ask you. You see things like, I mean, these days, I don't know if you use Twitter frequently. You know, there's this thing they say these days about Twitter being, people make false accusations on Twitter, and but without even mentioning names, but on social media against people, and they do so whether with botnet or whether tweeting from an account that don't reflect their name and who they are. But we've seen there was a case that was decided by the court in Ireland, where the court, it was called the Norwich pharmaceutical case, where the court had to order that the social media company, Facebook, should lift the veil of anonymity on a particular user of the internet. So my question to you now is, that was the decision of an Irish court's decision. Do you think we've made a valid case for why anonymity is important? We also made a valid case for why people could also use anonymity for vile reasons. And pretty much with every invention in the world, if it gets into the wrong hand, it could achieve the darkest of things. So now, should we, I'm not familiar with any African court that has made a similar decision, but should we be thinking around the same direction, where if there are allegations against people, we could, I mean, these things move very fast. The Ghana tweets, people screenshots, even when the tweet gets pulled down, that people who still screenshot and still have like a copy. And like they say, with the internet never forgets. So do you think we should start thinking in that direction, that when there is that legitimate need for it, we should lift anonymity? And do you think also when we start talking about that, it will be abused by the government? And I need to add this, that interestingly, the draft Digital Rights and Freedom Bill in Nigeria has a provision maintaining anonymity online, even though I feel that would also run in contrary to a certain provision of the Cyber Crimes Act. But I needed to answer that, should courts in Africa should start thinking in that direction? And how do we also ensure that governments don't come to the same courts to want to take away that and misuse it? And I want you to do that quickly. Thank you.
Yes, so I agree with you in the sense that where there's a legitimate objective, the courts can order, a social media service or social media platform or social media network to lift the anonymity bar on any person. I agree with that, but only to the extent that it is within, the reasonable limitations, the right to privacy. That is, it is proportionate, it is pursuing a legitimate aim, it is necessary. And also the legitimacy will come from the position that there's already an existent piece of legislation which points to the fact that this person has committed an offense, and there's a possibility that the government or the state can prove beyond reasonable doubt that indeed an offense has been committed. Under those circumstances, yes, the anonymity bar can be lifted. But also I'd want to flag that, for instance, where it's an issue that relates to communication of false information or false news, you realize that there are so many already existent court judgments that highlight that, false news offenses or false information offenses infringe on freedom of expression and cause self-censorship. So I think there'll also be a need for an independent thought in terms of the provision that intends to be enforced. Because if the provision itself is also unconstitutional or is unjustifiably limiting a right, then the court should not even tolerate a case for uplifting that anonymity.
Thank you very much for that. Nuruddin, we're going to come to you now. A poll is running. Please take part. I'm going to come back to the poll soon as well. So, Nuruddin.
Okay, all right. On quick and dirty today, basically what we do in this session is basically to look at Twitter trends, and we look at Twitter trends and we try to wrap that around some data protection, security, and privacy terms. This week, I think what has been trending, aside from I can't even pronounce that other thing.
Silhouette challenge, is that what you want to say?
Yes, but I can't pronounce it. I'm going to probably sound like Nompilo trying to pronounce pseudonymization. So let me just keep quiet.
That was Caroline. That was Caroline.
No, Caroline, okay, right. So let's keep quiet, right? So aside from that, I think what has been trending also, I don't know what's trending in Zimbabwe or Kenya, but we've had copy trending in Nigeria. And basically, and also tie that back to the other challenge. I'm not going to pronounce that name, right? What we should try to understand with this, with everything happening right now, it's basically that the internet never forgets. Whatever it is that you do, as long as that's like the first rule of the internet. Shegun, if I'm correct, the internet never forgets. People may forget, but the internet never forgets. I mean, if you go to 4chan, there's a 4chan rule of the internet. You can check that out. So that's just like the proverbial elephants, where we say, the internet it has an infallible and durable memory, as in you would always find things. People are always quick to bring out receipts of what you have done 20 years ago, 40 years ago, even more recently. Let's remember that as we engage in all these challenges. But more importantly, I think it's also important to focus this on young people, on the youths. People who are old, most of them don't even have anything to do on the internet and probably check Facebook and post their baby pictures or family pictures. But for youths, some of these things that we do, they might have like an impact to our lives later in the future. Past identities, the action, they stick to us as we enter into adulthood. And basically, it doesn't just affect us individually, it might also affect the society at large. There's an article about MIT, which I would love for everyone to read. And also recently, we have seen cases of people doing things and being referred back to their past as one of the reasons why they're not getting a job or why they have to be suspended from school, or people just bringing out some dirty information they have in their past, which they've posted online. So let's be mindful of all these things. As long as it's on the internet, it's always on the internet. Clearing out your digital footprint is almost a myth. If you are not going to be proud of it in the future, don't post it on the internet. That's it for me.
All right. Thank you very much, Nuruddin. This time around, we'll go into the quiz session. And I'm going to allow time for people to be able to get on. The quiz session is sponsored by Tech Advisory, and if you're lucky to win, so get on it. The quiz will go live in a bit. Let me wait for about 1 more minute so we can all get on that.
Please, what's the prize?
You get a gift card, that's the prize. But you're not allowed to participate. You can't be a judge in your own course.
But why? Wait. This thing is automated. The answers are in the system. I'm not judging. Am I judging?
You can't be a judge in your own course.
See, this is why we say we can't trust our government. We cannot trust our government. Look at what you are doing in your regime, Ridwan.
So I'm going to wait for more people to get on the quiz. And we get it started. Okay, I guess we'll roll with the people that we have now. All right. About to find out what our winner is for this week. All right. Dayo again. Congratulations for being our winner for this week. We're going to get in touch. Thank you for participating. And yeah, we're going to be in touch. Congratulations. All right. Next thing, privacy fail for the week of the day. Nurdin.
All right, Ridwan, thanks for this. I mean, I'll make this short, right? You would find I think I've seen this in a number of privacy policies where people are talking about security, and they always mention, I mean, when it comes to other organizational and technical security measures that are actually mentioned in data protection regulation, you would hear people tout and say, our encryption is military grade. It's fine to say that. I won't argue with you, but then is which military is that? Is it Nigerian military or US military? So there might be a need for you to explain that. So, but then you find this very often. People say this a lot. Military grade encryption, military grade encryption. I mean, what does it really mean? It's, permit me to say, for a lack of better use of words, it's actually total bollocks. But then there is that assertion to the advanced encryption standard, AES. It's called AES.
Are you saying it's a snake oil?
It's a snake oil, oh, brother. It's a snake oil. Oh. Let them explain what the military grade is, whether it's Nigerian military or US military or... I mean, because there are different kinds of military, right? I mean, so which military are you talking about? Is it the one fighting in Sambisa or the one fighting in Afghanistan or Iran? So, but then what people tend to do, or what people tend to say when they say military grade encryption, is they are talking about the encryption system they have in place. But encryption is not all about security, or security is not all about encryption. Encryption is one of the key aspects of security, but then beyond encryption, there are some other things which you need to do. So whenever you read this in a privacy notice under security and say that encryption is military grade, or we adopt a military grade encryption for security, they really don't know what they are saying. I mean, just assume that if you probe it further, they might probably say that they are using AES 256 for encryption. And you also need to ask them again, so what encryption is that? Is that encryption of data at rest? Is that encryption of data in transit? while also bearing in mind that even AES 256, which is like the strongest encryption today, is also prone to side channel attacks. During my master's program, that was one of the research that was done. There was a side channel attack that was actually used to crack an AES 256 encryption. So let's always ask questions whenever we see this in privacy notices.
No,
All right, thanks.
no Lambda dropping.
Yes, so.
All right. Just before I come to my panelists for their last thoughts, we're going to do this. Nampilo, over to you, please.
Sorry, I was muted again. Yes. So our recommended tool is Privacy Badger, which is an ad blocker. And in terms of the advantages, it blocks third-party scripts and blocks third-party trackers. And it also detects canvas-based fingerprinting. And then, of course, from the cons or the disadvantages, one key aspect is that it does not block all ads, but it's available as a browser or an add-on. So it can be an add-on for Chrome, for Brave, or for Mozilla. I think that will be all from the recommended tool. And maybe as a commitment, I'll make sure that everyone in our office also uses this Privacy Badger.
I mean, you just let me do some sort of whistleblowing. I mean, you just confess you don't use it yourself.
This was told in confidence. Come on.
Okay, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. All right. Thank you very much, Nampilo. All right. So I'm just gonna come to every one of you. Your last thoughts on this. Nampilo, I want to start from you. What would you how would you like to close?
So my closing remarks really would be that anonymity online is very crucial. Obviously, because I'm a proponent of digital rights, I believe that people should be able to freely exercise their rights without any fear. And therefore, they should be freely able to express their opinions under also a certain cover of privacy, and obviously be able also to access information through the exchange of ideas that happens online. But of course, I also appreciate that there are online ills that are associated with anonymity. And my suggestion would be that different stakeholders should come together and ensure that for any limitation, we are able to strike a balance between making online spaces safer and also creating a pathway for exercise of rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nampilo. Caroline.
My closing remarks will be that anonymity cannot be fully achieved in the age we live in, and also neither can we also totally ignore it. But at the end of the day, online security, privacy, cybersecurity starts from an individual. It emanates from an individual. It all starts with you, personal information and protection, and ensuring usage, sharing, and all that. It's all narrows down to an individual for status. But at the end of the day, we must keep on championing for policies and legislations that promote both law and order, as well as protection of individual rights in their own sense. That would be my closing shot. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Segun.
My last words would be to ask everyone to continue to educate themselves. Like we said about incognito mode, it's not a silver bullet. So many things which may be popular or touted, like Nuruddin said, military grade encryption, all those things. Educate yourself on what those things mean and what they mean for you. And if you can accept them or if you cannot accept them, Also consider the fact that you may not need to be completely hidden on the internet like you're in a cave. Yeah, that's what I'll say. Educate yourself and don't be afraid. Don't approach anonymity with fear.
I think Ridwan is muted. I'll just go next. Use privacy preserving tools. There are quite a number of that online, and I think TechHive also has done like a coalition of those privacy preserving tools. One of the web browsers I use today is Brave. I was actually on a webinar with the DPO of Brave earlier on today, where he was talking about the amount of work which they are doing with ads and tracking. So, I mean, use privacy preserving tool. Remember the first rule of the internet: whatever goes on the internet stays on the internet. Remember that rule. I want you to remember that, to let that be your guide as you safely surf the internet and while you try to stay anonymous or on the internet.
All right. Thank you very much again. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Below Caroline, Nordin, Shegun. Thank you very much for time and sharing a wealth of knowledge with us. Thank you, everyone who has attended, who also have left or dropped off. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. We'll come again, another exciting topic, and also another amazing line of speakers to get on another interesting. Thank you. Keep sharing with us. Keep mentioning us on Twitter and LinkedIn. It's Privacy Bar and Bants on. It's private at Privacy Bar Bants on Twitter. And we hope to see you again next week. And let's keep the conversation going. Thank you very much, everyone. Good rest of the weekend. Cheers. And
Yes.
happy
Thanks,
Data
everyone.
Protection
Thank
Day,
you.
Nadia.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
Apollo. Bye, Caroline. Mr. Shegun.
Mr. Nuruddin,
Aelio.
I greet you, sir.